Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his battlecruiser, watching the small human ship on his main screen. The vessel looked weak and old compared to his mighty warship. His blue-scaled hands gripped the command rail as he studied the target. The human transport ship was alone in the dark space between stars, far from any help. "Sir, the human ship is not running away," reported his weapons officer, a young Vraxian named Court. His voice carried surprise. Most ships fled when they saw the massive battlecruiser approaching. Zethkar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Good. This will be easy then." He had heard stories about humans being dangerous fighters, but looking at their small ship, he found it hard to believe. The humans had only been traveling in space for 200 years. That was nothing compared to the 1,000-year history of the Vraxian Empire. The human ship was called Earthbound Hope, according to their scanner readings. It was a research vessel with only 12 crew members. Zethkar's battlecruiser carried over 3,000 warriors. This would be like stepping on an insect. "Open communication channel," Zethkar ordered. The screen flickered and showed the face of a human male. The man had gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. He looked tired but not afraid. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthbound Hope," the human said. His voice was calm and steady. "I assume you want something from us." Zethkar was taken aback by the human's casual tone. Most species begged for mercy when faced with Vraxian warships. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Imperial Fleet. You will surrender your ship immediately and prepare to be boarded." Captain Morrison scratched his chin and leaned back in his chair. "Well, Commander, I have a better idea. How about we make a deal instead?" "A deal?" Zethkar laughed. "You are in no position to make deals, human. You have one small ship. I have a battlecruiser and 2 escort fighters." "That's true," Morrison agreed, "but I have something you might want. Information about Vraxian fleet movements in this sector. Seems like someone has been talking to us about your secret supply routes." This made Zethkar pause. Intelligence was always valuable, especially if the humans had somehow learned about classified military operations. But he was suspicious. "Why would you offer this information?" "Because my crew and I would prefer to keep breathing," Morrison said with a slight smile. "We give you the information. You let us go. Everyone wins." Zethkar considered this. Information could be useful, but he also had orders to capture any human ships in this area. "No, you will surrender now, or I will destroy your ship." Morrison's expression did not change. "Well, that's disappointing. I was hoping we could do this the easy way." He turned to someone off screen. "Lisa Dawn, you heard the man. Time for aggressive negotiations." The communication channel closed. Zethkar stared at the empty screen, confused by the human's words. Aggressive negotiations? What did that mean? His answer came 30 seconds later. The human ship suddenly accelerated directly toward his battlecruiser. Alarm bells rang across the bridge as the small vessel closed the distance at dangerous speed. "Sir, they are on a collision course," shouted the navigation officer. "Evasive maneuvers." Ordered. The massive battlecruiser slowly began to turn. But the human ship was much faster and more agile. At the last moment, the human ship spun sideways and fired something from its cargo bay. It was not a weapon, but some kind of mining explosive. The blast was small compared to military weapons, but it hit the battlecruiser's communication array, knocking out long-range communications. "How did they know exactly where to hit us?" Cord asked, his voice shaking. Before Zethkar could answer, one of his escort fighters exploded. The human ship had somehow fired another improvised weapon, this time hitting the fighter's engine core. The small transport was now weaving between the remaining ships like a dancing insect. It's impossible to target with the large weapons. "All fighters attack that ship," Zethkar roared into his communicator. The remaining escort fighter moved to intercept, but the human ship did something unexpected. Instead of running or fighting, it released a cloud of metallic debris from its cargo hold. The escort fighter flew straight into the cloud. The metal pieces tore through its hull like bullets. Within 5 minutes, both of Zethkar's escort fighters were destroyed or disabled. His battlecruiser was damaged and could not communicate with the fleet. The small human ship sat in space nearby, apparently unharmed. The communication channel opened again. Captain Morrison appeared on screen, but now he was not alone. A woman with short dark hair stood beside him, along with a younger man wearing an engineer's uniform. Commander Zethkar Morrison said politely, "I would like you to meet Lisa Parker, our chief engineer, and Dan Cooper, our pilot. They are the ones who just demonstrated why attacking a human ship is usually a bad idea." Lisa Parker stepped forward. "Those mining charges we used. We modified them in about 10 minutes using spare parts from our engine room. The debris cloud? Recycled metal from our lunch trays and maintenance supplies." Dan Cooper grinned. "Your fighters are built for fighting other military ships. They were not designed to handle unconventional attacks from a supposedly harmless research vessel." Zethkar felt his confidence crumbling. "This is impossible. You are scientists, not warriors." "That's where you are wrong," Morrison said. "Every human is a warrior when they need to be. We have been fighting and surviving for thousands of years. We learn to use whatever we have at hand to defend ourselves." Suddenly, new ships appeared on the scanner. A single human destroyer had arrived, much smaller than Zethkar's battlecruiser, but clearly military. The communication channel expanded. To include a new face, a human female with short blonde hair and the bearing of a senior officer. "This is Admiral Kate Johnson of the destroyer Liberty Bell," the woman said. Her voice was crisp and professional. "Got Commander Zethkar? You are in violation of the Galactic Peace Treaty by attacking civilian vessels. I suggest you withdraw immediately." Zethkar looked at his tactical display. One human destroyer against his battlecruiser should not be a threat, even with his damage. But something in the Admiral's confident tone made him hesitate. "Admiral, you have one ship. I have a battlecruiser," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Admiral Johnson smiled coldly. "Commander, your ship is damaged, your communications are down, and your escort fighters are destroyed. My ship is fully operational with a crew that has been fighting pirates and raiders for the past 5 years. But more importantly, you just learned what happens when humans get creative with basic equipment. Do you really want to find out what we can do with actual military weapons?" Zethkar looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at him, waiting for orders. The tactical officer was shaking his head slightly, indicating that their chances of victory were poor. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zethkar ordered a retreat as his ship limped away from the encounter. Zethkar could not stop thinking about what had happened. 12 humans on a research ship had defeated his escort fighters using lunch trays and mining equipment. One human destroyer had convinced him to retreat without firing a shot. Maybe the stories about humans were true after all. Zethkar could not sleep. 3 days had passed since his encounter with the human ships, but his mind kept replaying the events. How had 12 humans on a research vessel defeated his escort fighters? How had one human destroyer convinced him to retreat without even firing a shot? The questions bothered him so much that he decided to find answers. Zethkar went to the ship's data archives and began searching for information about human military history. What he found made him more confused than before. The humans had only been in space for 200 years, but they had been fighting wars on their home planet for thousands of years. The database showed records of countless battles, each one stranger than the last. These humans seemed to fight differently than any other species in the galaxy. Zethkar read about something called the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 human warriors had faced an army of hundreds of thousands. By all logic, the 300 should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, they held their position for 3 days, killing thousands of enemies before finally falling. The humans had chosen a narrow pass, where the larger army could not use its numbers effectively. "Impossible," Zethkar muttered to himself. "No rational species would attempt such a defense." Yet the humans had done it. Their sacrifice had inspired their entire civilization to fight harder. He found another record about a human named George Washington. This human had led a rebellion against a much stronger empire. Washington's army was smaller, poorly equipped, and often hungry. Any sensible commander would have surrendered quickly. Instead, Washington spent years avoiding large battles and attacking when his enemies least expected it. He won the war by refusing to fight fair. Zethkar's confusion grew as he read more records. Humans seemed to specialize in impossible victories. At a place called Stalingrad, they had fought for every building, every street, every room. The enemy had superior weapons and more soldiers, but the humans simply would not give up. They fought until the enemy decided the cost was too high and retreated. The more Zethkar read, the more disturbed he became. Other species fought for territory, resources, or honor. Humans fought for survival, and they had turned survival into an art form. They used whatever weapons they could find, fought in any environment, and never seemed to know when they were beaten. One file particularly caught his attention. It described human special forces, elite soldiers who specialized in impossible missions. Zethkar read about a human named Jack Murphy, a Navy SEAL who had completed over 50 missions behind enemy lines. Murphy had once spent 3 weeks alone in hostile territory, surviving on insects and rainwater while gathering intelligence on enemy positions. Another file told the story of Helen Clark, an Army Ranger who had rescued 30 hostages from a heavily guarded compound using nothing but stealth, patience, and improvised explosives made from cleaning supplies. She had studied the guards for 2 weeks, learning their routines. Before striking at the moment when they were least prepared, these humans did not just fight with strength or superior technology. They fought with their minds, using creativity and adaptability as weapons. They could survive in any environment because they had evolved to be survivors on a dangerous planet. Zethkar discovered that Earth was a world where almost everything could kill you. The weather was unpredictable and violent. The planet was filled with predators, diseases, and natural disasters. Humans had survived by becoming the ultimate predators themselves, not through physical power, but through intelligence, cooperation, and an absolute refusal to quit. The database contained recordings of human military training. Zethkar watched in amazement as human soldiers practiced fighting in every possible situation. They learned to fight in water, in darkness, in extreme heat and cold. They practiced using improvised weapons and surviving without proper equipment. 1. Training exercise showed humans learning to escape from capture. They were taught to pick locks, break restraints, and turn everyday objects into tools and weapons. The humans called it survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training. They prepared their soldiers for the possibility that everything could go wrong. Zethkar paused the recording and thought about his own military training. Phyrexian warriors learned to use their natural strength and advanced weapons. They practiced formation, fighting, and following orders, but they never learned to improvise when things went wrong. They never learned to fight when they had nothing but their minds, whatever they could find lying around. He continued reading and found files about human asymmetric warfare. This was a way of fighting where the weaker side used unconventional tactics to defeat a stronger enemy. Humans had perfected this type of warfare over thousands of years. They fought using guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and psychological warfare. One story described how human rebels had defeated an occupying army by making the cost of occupation too high. They did not win large battles. Instead, they made every day dangerous for their enemies. They attacked supply lines, destroyed equipment, and made the enemy afraid to leave their bases. Eventually, the stronger army gave up and went home. Another file told of a human named Nathan Hale, who had been captured. While spying on enemy forces, when offered a chance to save his life by giving up information, he had refused. His last words were recorded as, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." The human had chosen death over surrender. Zethkar realized that this attitude was common among humans, who would rather die than give up. This was not because they were stupid or did not value life. It was because they understood that some things were more important than individual survival. They fought for their families, their beliefs, and their freedom. The database contained modern files as well. Zethkar read about recent human conflicts and was amazed by their creativity. Human engineers had turned cargo ships into warships, civilian aircraft into bombers, and farming equipment into armored vehicles. When they could not buy weapons, they made them. When they could not make weapons, they improvised them. One report described how human colonists had defended their settlement from pirates using nothing but mining equipment and fertilizer. They had turned their entire colony into a fortress, using mining charges as weapons and excavation equipment as mobile gun platforms. The pirates had given up after losing half their fleet to what they thought were helpless farmers. As Zethkar closed the files, he felt a chill run through his scaled body. Finally understood what had happened during his encounter with the research ship. Those humans had not been lucky or desperate. They had been doing what humans had always done, adapting, improvising, and refusing to accept defeat. Captain Morrison and his crew had turned their cargo hold into an arsenal and their ship into a weapon. They had fought with the same creativity and determination that humans had used for thousands of years. Admiral Johnson had not needed to fire her weapons because her reputation and confidence had been enough to convince Zethkar that fighting would be too costly. Zethkar realized that the stories about humans were not exaggerations. If anything, they were understatements. Humans were not just dangerous because they were good fighters. They were dangerous because they never stopped fighting, never stopped adapting, never accepted that anything was impossible. He closed the database and sat in silence, finally understanding why the galaxy feared to fight a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to survive against impossible odds. Weeks had passed since Zethkar began studying human military history. The more he learned, the more worried he became. But it was not until he started reading recent battle reports that the true horror of fighting humans became clear to him. Zethkar accessed the military intelligence database and found files about recent conflicts involving human forces. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The humans were not just using their ancient fighting methods in space. They were getting better at it. The first file describes something called the Proxima Centauri incident. 3 different alien species had been fighting a civil war over mining rights to a rich asteroid field. The war had been going on for 2 years, with thousands dying every month. Each side had powerful weapons and strong armies, but none could win a complete victory. Then the humans arrived. Colonel Ryan Brooks commanded a small peacekeeping force of only 500 soldiers. The 3 warring sides had armies of over 50,000 each. Everyone expected the humans to pick a side and tip the balance of the war. Instead, Colonel Brooks did something unexpected. He invited all 3 sides to a meeting on a neutral space station. At the meeting, he did not talk about peace or stopping the fighting. Instead, he showed them financial records. Brooks had discovered that the same weapons companies were selling arms to all 3 sides. The war was making certain people very rich, while the 3 species killed each other over resources that could easily be shared. He showed them shipping manifests, bank records, and communication intercepts that proved the weapons dealers were prolonging the war on purpose. Within a week, all 3 sides had signed a peace agreement. But they did not stop fighting completely. Instead, they joined forces and went after the weapons dealers, who had been profiting from their suffering. The war ended not because the humans forced peace, but because they helped the enemies understand who their real enemies were. Zethkar read the report 3 times, trying to understand what had happened. The humans had ended a 2-year war without firing a single shot. They had turned enemies into allies by showing them the truth. This was a kind of warfare that Zethkar had never seen before. The next file was about the Vega System incident. A large pirate fleet had been attacking merchant ships for months. The pirates had fast ships and knew the system well. Several military forces had tried to stop them. The pirates always escaped into the asteroid fields where larger ships could not follow. Captain Amy Foster commanded a small human patrol fleet of only 6 ships. The pirates had over 30 vessels and had already defeated 2 alien naval forces. Most commanders would have called for reinforcements and waited for a larger fleet. Foster did not wait. Instead, she studied the pirates' attack patterns and realized they always struck in the same way. They would attack a merchant convoy, steal what they could carry quickly, and then disappear into the asteroids. They were successful because they were fast and predictable. Foster used this against them. She set a trap by disguising her warships as merchant vessels. When the pirates attacked, they found themselves facing military weapons instead of defenseless cargo ships. But Foster did not try to destroy the entire pirate fleet at once. Instead, She damaged a few ships and let the rest escape. The pirates regrouped and tried again, but Foster was ready. Each time they attacked, she destroyed one or two ships and damaged several others. The pirates began to make mistakes because they were frustrated and confused. They started fighting each other, arguing about whether to continue attacking or find easier targets. After 3 weeks of this, the pirate fleet fell apart. Some pirates surrendered to Foster's forces. Others left the system entirely. The rest were so weakened that local security forces could handle them easily. Foster had defeated a superior force by refusing to fight the way they expected. Zethkar realized that Foster had used an ancient human strategy called the Fabian approach, named after a Roman general who had defeated stronger enemies by avoiding direct confrontation and wearing them down over time. The humans were applying thousands-year-old tactics. It's a space warfare. But the most disturbing report was about the defense of New Geneva. This was a human colony world that had been attacked by the Korthok Empire. The Korthok were famous throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds through pure strength and aggression. The Korthok had sent an invasion force of 10,000 warriors to take New Geneva. The planet was defended by only 40 human marines, led by Lieutenant Chris Taylor. The odds were 250 to 1 against the humans. Any rational military commander would have ordered an immediate evacuation. Taylor did not evacuate. Instead, he positioned his marines in the colony's main city and prepared to make the Korthok pay for every building, every street, every room. The humans turned the entire city into a fortress, using civilian buildings as fighting positions and connecting them with underground tunnels. When the Korthok landed, expected a quick victory. The humans were vastly outnumbered and had no hope of winning a direct battle. But Taylor's Marines did not fight a direct battle. They fought the way humans had always fought when outnumbered, with intelligence, creativity, and absolute refusal to surrender. The Marines used hit-and-run tactics, striking at Korthok forces and then disappearing into the tunnels. They booby-trapped buildings with improvised explosives made from mining equipment and farming chemicals. They turned civilian vehicles into mobile weapon platforms and used construction equipment as makeshift tanks. For 3 days, the Korthok fought their way through the city, building by building. They had superior weapons and overwhelming numbers, but the humans made them pay for every meter of ground. When the Marines ran low on ammunition, they used improvised weapons. When their positions were overrun, they fell back and regrouped. Korthok had expected to lose perhaps 100 warriors taking the colony. After 3 days, they had lost over 3,000. The remaining humans were still fighting, still refusing to surrender, still making the cost of victory higher with each passing hour. On the 4th day, the Korthok commander made a decision that shocked the entire galaxy. He ordered his forces to withdraw, not because they were defeated, but because he realized the humans would never stop fighting. Even if the Korthok eventually won, they would lose so many warriors that other enemies could icily attack their weakened empire. Lieutenant Taylor and his 40 Marines had not won by being stronger than the Korthok. They had won by being too expensive to defeat. They had turned their refusal to surrender into a weapon that made victory meaningless for their enemies. Zethkar closed the files and sat in stunned silence. These reports showed him something terrifying about human nature. Humans did not just fight to win battles. They fought to make their enemies understand that. Fighting humans was always a mistake. The humans had learned to turn every disadvantage into an advantage. When outnumbered, they used guerrilla tactics. When outgunned, they used improvised weapons. When facing superior technology, they used creativity and unpredictability. Most importantly, they had learned to make the cost of defeating them higher than any victory was worth. Zethkar finally understood why his encounter with the research ship had ended so badly. Captain Morrison and his crew had not just defended themselves, they had demonstrated that even civilian humans were dangerous when threatened. They had shown that fighting any human ship, no matter how small, could result in unexpected losses. The truth was simple, but terrifying. Humans had spent thousands of years learning how to survive impossible situations. They had turned survival into a science, adaptability into an art form, and stubbornness into a strategic weapon. They were not just warriors. They were the ultimate expression of a species that had refused to quit for so long that they had forgotten how. 5 years had passed since Zethkar's first encounter with humans. He had risen through the ranks of the Varaxian military and now commanded an entire task force. His superiors trusted him completely, and his reputation as a careful and intelligent commander had spread throughout the fleet. But now Zethkar faced the most difficult decision of his career, as the Varaxian High Command had ordered him to prepare for war against the humans. Political tensions had been growing for months. The Emperor believed that humanity's small fleet and limited territory showed weakness that could be exploited. Zethkar stood in the briefing room, looking at the tactical displays that showed human space. On paper, the invasion looked easy. The humans had only 50 major warships compared to the Varaxian fleet of over 300. Human territory consisted of just 12 star systems. While the Varaxian Empire controlled over 100 worlds, the humans are clearly overextended, said Admiral Vorth, the task force's political officer. They have spread themselves too thin trying to maintain their trade routes and colony worlds. A quick strike at their main fleet base should end this war in days. The other commanders nodded in agreement. They saw only numbers on displays and reports from intelligence officers who had never fought humans directly. Zethkar remained silent. Remembering his studies of human military history, General Crix pointed at the tactical display. Our intelligence shows that most of their fleet is concentrated at Earth and their major colonies. If we strike simultaneously at 3 locations, we can destroy their ability to resist before they can organize a defense. What about their civilian population? Asked Captain Neth, the youngest commander present. Should we prepare for occupation duties? Admiral Vorth laughed. The humans will surrender quickly once their military is defeated. They are a young species with no experience of real war. Once they see our superior strength, they will accept Varaxian rule rather than face total destruction. Zethkar could remain silent no longer. He had listened to this dangerous thinking for too long. Admiral, I believe you are making a serious mistake. The room fell quiet. All eyes turned to Zethkar, and he could see surprise and anger on several faces. Admiral Vorth's expression darkened. Commander, do you question the wisdom of the High Command? I question the intelligence reports, Zethkar replied carefully. I have studied human military capabilities extensively, and I believe our estimates of their strength are dangerously wrong. General Crix laughed. Commander, you defeated a single human research vessel years ago. That hardly makes you an expert. On their entire military... Actually, General, they defeated me, Zethkar said quietly. A research ship with 12 crew members destroyed my escort fighters and forced my retreat. That experience led me to study human warfare in detail. Zethkar activated his personal data display and showed the room his research files. Humans do not fight the way other species fight. They do not seek quick victories or territorial conquest. They fight for survival, and they have made survival an art form. He showed them the report about Captain Susan Wright's defense of the mining station at Alpha Centauri. Wright had been in command of a small mining outpost when pirates attacked. Instead of surrendering or calling for help, she had turned asteroid mining equipment into weapons. The mining lasers became anti-ship guns, the ore haulers became mobile fortresses, and the refinery itself became a fortress that took the pirates 3 weeks to overcome. By the time Wright's position finally fell, human reinforcements had arrived and trapped the entire pirate fleet, Zethkar explained. She did not win by being stronger than her enemies. She won by making the cost of victory too high and buying time for help to arrive. Admiral Vorth was not impressed. Commander, mining pirates are not the same as the Imperial fleet. We have superior weapons, better training, and overwhelming numbers. Zethkar showed them another file. This is the report on General Paul Harris and the Andromedon border war. The Andromedons had a fleet twice the size of the human force and superior technology. The war should have ended in their favor within months. Instead, Harris had employed what the humans called asymmetric warfare. He avoided large battles and instead targeted Andromedon supply lines, communication networks, and isolated outposts. The humans acted like space pirates, striking without warning and disappearing. Before reinforcements could arrive, the Andromedans won every major battle, Zethkar continued. But they lost the war because Harris made it impossible for them to hold the territory they conquered. Every Andromedan base required constant defense. Every supply convoy needed heavy escort. Every officer had to worry about human attacks at any time. The Andromedans had finally agreed to peace not because they were defeated, but because the war had become too expensive to continue. They were spending more resources defending their gains than those gains were worth. Captain Neth looked troubled. But surely our superior numbers would prevent such tactics from working. Zethkar shook his head. Numbers do not matter if the enemy refuses to fight the way you expect. Let me show you something that happened just last year. He displayed a file about the defense of New Geneva that he had studied extensively. 40 human marines held off 10,000 Korthok warriors for 3 days. The Korthok are considered among the finest warriors in the galaxy, yet they withdrew because the cost of victory was too high. The Korthok made a mistake, Admiral, Vorth said dismissively. They should have simply bombarded the city from orbit and destroyed the resources they came to capture, Zethkar replied. The same problem we would face if we tried to conquer human worlds. We could destroy their cities, but that would make the conquest worthless. If we try to take them intact, we face the same problem the Korthok faced. Zethkar brought up his final piece of evidence: intelligence reports about human fleet movements. Over the past year, look at how they respond to threats. When pirates attacked the Kepler system, the humans did not send a large fleet to hunt them down. Instead, they sent small, fast ships that made the pirates' bases untenable. The human ships had not tried to fight the pirate fleet directly. Instead, they had made it impossible for the pirates to operate safely. They attacked pirate supply ships, mined the approaches to pirate bases, and turned local merchant ships into intelligence-gathering platforms. Within 6 months, the pirates had left the system entirely. This is what we would face if we attacked human space, Zethkar warned. We might win the initial battles, but we would never be safe. Every supply convoy would be at risk. Every occupied world would require constant defense. Every officer would have to sleep with one eye open. The room was silent as the commanders absorbed this information. Finally, General Crick spoke. Do you recommend, Commander? Zethkar took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define his career and possibly determine the fate of both species. I recommend that we cancel the invasion entirely. Admiral Vorth stood up angrily. That is treason, Commander. The Emperor has ordered this war. Emperor has ordered a war based on incomplete information, Zethkar replied calmly. If we attack the humans, we will learn why no other species in the galaxy fights them anymore. We can defeat them in battle, but we cannot defeat them in war. Zethkar prepared his final report for the High Command that night. He wrote about human psychology, their refusal to surrender, and their ability to turn any disadvantage into a weapon. He described how they had weaponized their own stubbornness and made survival into a strategic advantage. But the most important part of his report was the final paragraph. The humans do not fight to win territories or resources. They fight to survive, and they have made survival an art form.
How?
We can conquer their worlds, but we cannot conquer their spirit. They will fight us with whatever they can find, wherever they can find us, for as long as they draw breath. Victory against such an enemy would cost us everything we sought to gain. 3 days later, Zethkar received new orders. The invasion was cancelled. The Emperor had read his report and decided that war with humanity was too dangerous to risk. The Varaxian Empire would seek diplomatic solutions instead of military ones. Zethkar felt relief wash over him as he realized he had prevented a war that would have destroyed both species. The humans would never know how close they had come to invasion, or how their reputation for being impossible to defeat had saved them once again, in the depths of space. Human ships continued their missions, unaware that their greatest victory had been won not through force of arms, but but through the fear they inspired in those who understood what it meant to fight a species that had never learned how to lose.